Imagine being locked in a cell smaller than a bathroom. No windows. No human contact. No idea if today is Monday or Friday. No idea if it's been 6 months or 6 years. You are beaten. Starved. Psychologically broken down piece by piece. And yet, some men survive this. Not just physically, but mentally. They come out the other side with their minds intact. Their identity preserved. Their will unbroken. How is this possible? What happens inside the human mind when it is pushed to its absolute limit? Today, we go inside the psychology of survival, the mental secrets of prisoners of war who endured the unendurable. Stay with me. The psychological effects of captivity begin almost immediately. Within days of isolation, the human brain starts to deteriorate. Without external stimulation, the mind turns inward. And without proper management, what it finds there can destroy a person. Researchers studying former POWs have documented a predictable pattern of psychological breakdown. First comes shock and disbelief. Then anger. Then a desperate attempt to make sense of the situation. But it's what comes next that separates the survivors from those who break. Some prisoners enter a state of learned helplessness, a psychological condition first identified by Dr. Martin Seligman. When a person believes they have no control over their situation, they stop trying. They give up. And giving up in captivity is often a death sentence. But others do something different. Something that seems almost impossible given the circumstances. They find control where none appears to exist. Admiral James Stockdale spent over 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He was tortured more than 20 times. He was kept in isolation for years. And he survived, with his mind intact. When asked what was his secret, his answer was simple. He controlled what he could control. And he made peace with what he could not. Every day in captivity, Stockdale created structure. He set mental tasks for himself. He exercised in his tiny cell. He memorized poetry. He planned. He thought. He refused to let his mind become idle. Because an idle mind in isolation becomes its own torturer. Psychologists call this internal locus of control, the belief that you have agency over your own mind and actions, even when you have no agency over your physical circumstances. POWs who maintained this belief survived at significantly higher rates than those who felt completely at the mercy of their captors. The body can be imprisoned. The mind only surrenders if you allow it to. One of the most extraordinary stories of POW survival involves a simple system of taps on a wall. American prisoners in the Hanoi Hilton, the infamous Vietnamese prison camp, developed a tap code. A 5x5 grid of letters. 2 sets of taps, one for the row, one for the column, and you could communicate any message through a concrete wall. They used it to share news. To tell jokes. To warn each other of incoming guards. To remind each other that they were not alone. Military psychologists now understand that this communication system was not just a practical tool, it was a psychological lifeline. Human beings are social creatures at a neurological level. Prolonged isolation causes measurable damage to the brain, shrinking the hippocampus, disrupting cortisol regulation, triggering symptoms identical to physical trauma. The tap code didn't just carry messages. It carried humanity. And humanity, in the darkness of a prison cell, is the difference between survival and collapse. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote one of the most important psychological texts ever produced. His central argument was radical in its simplicity. A man can survive almost any suffering if he has a reason to survive. POWs who maintained a clear sense of purpose, who held on to a reason to return home, demonstrated dramatically better psychological outcomes than those who lost their sense of meaning. Some held on to their families. The image of a wife. A child they had never met. A promise to return. Some held on to duty, the belief that their survival was a form of resistance. That every day they endured without breaking was a victory against their captors. Some held on to faith. A belief that their suffering was part of something larger than themselves. The specific content of the meaning didn't matter as much as its presence. As long as there was a reason, there was a will. And where there is a will, the human mind finds extraordinary ways to survive. But survival is not the end of the story. Many POWs who endured years of captivity returned home to find that the real battle was just beginning. The same psychological mechanisms that kept them alive in captivity, the emotional detachment, the hypervigilance, the obsessive need for control, became liabilities in civilian life. Men who had mastered the art of feeling nothing found themselves unable to feel the warmth of their own families. Men who had survived by trusting no one found intimacy impossible. Men who had structured every minute of their captivity found the freedom of civilian life overwhelming and disorienting. Research on returning POWs shows rates of PTSD, depression, and relationship breakdown significantly higher than the general veteran population. The mind that was built for survival must be rebuilt for living. And that process is often harder than the captivity itself. The psychology of POW survival is not just a story about war. It is a masterclass in the architecture of the human mind under pressure. It teaches us that control is internal before it is external. That meaning is not found, it is chosen. That connection, even through a tapped wall, is a biological necessity. And that the stories we tell ourselves about our circumstances determine our survival more than the circumstances themselves. These are not abstract philosophical ideas. They are lessons written in blood and suffering by men who had no other choice but to discover them, and they apply to every difficult moment in every ordinary life. The prison doesn't have to be made of concrete. Sometimes it's made of circumstances. Of loss. Of failure. Of despair. And the escape is always the same. Internal. Chosen. Human. Some men entered prison camps as soldiers. They came out as something else entirely. Not broken. Not bitter. But forged. Carrying wounds that never fully heal, and wisdom that can never be fully taught. The secret of their survival is not superhuman strength. It is the most human thing imaginable. The refusal to stop being human. If this changed how you see the limits of the human mind, subscribe. Because we're just getting started.